Hey crew, it's Pitt, and I'm back with some more esoterica. Today we are diving back into the works of Mr. Henry Cornelius Agrippa. This is the 3 books of occult philosophy. We are on book 1. We are reading aloud and discussing as we go along the various points brought to light by the text. It's not the format for everyone, but people do find value in it, so you are more than welcome to tag along as we continue our exploration. Before we begin, however, if you are unfamiliar with me, any of my unconventional beliefs, or if at any point in time I lose you in the terminology, there will be several playlists linked in the corner above, in the box down below, along with the original source material and the link for my book where I teach you to practice magic responsibly, so that you can get a better understanding of who I am and why I say the things that I do. With that being said, we are going to dive in and continue our exploration with Book 1, Chapter 4. Or Chapter 6, of the wonderful natures of water, air, and winds. And once again, we will be doing multiple chapters. The other 2 elements, vis-a-vis water and air, are not less efficacious than the former. Neither is nature wanting to work wonderful things in them. There is so great a necessity of water that without it no living thing can live. That is true. No herb or plant whatsoever, without the moistening of water, can branch forth. It is in the seminary virtue of all things, especially of animals, whose seed is manifestly waterish. The seeds, also, of trees and plants, although they are earthy, must, notwithstanding of necessity, be rotted in water before they can be fruitful, whether they be imbibed with the moisture of the earth, or with dew or rain, or any other water that is on purpose put to them. For Moses writes, that only earth and water bring forth a living soul. But let's look at these footnotes. I think there was some of these we actually wanted to see. Well, never mind. It's all the way down there. Anyway. The seeds of the trees and plants, although they are earthy, must not... on purpose put them. For Moses writes that only earth and water bring forth a living soul. Moses didn't write anything. But he ascribes a 2-fold production to things to water, vis-a-vis of things swimming in the waters, and of things flying in the air above the earth, and that those productions are made in and upon the earth, are partly attributed to the very water. The same scripture testifies, where it saith that the plants and herbs did not grow, because God had not caused it to rain upon the earth. It is important to note that, it's tangential to note, that prior to the flood, the lore is that there was no rain. Such is the efficiency of this element of water that spiritual regeneration cannot be done without it. That is a lie. As Christ himself testified to Nicodemus, that is very much a misunderstanding. Very great. Nobody, you don't have to be dunked into water to be redeemed. That is just simply not true, right? Now, what baptism is an outward expression of an inward faith, the same way that a wedding ring is. A wedding ring doesn't make you married. A wedding ring signifies to other people that you have been married. Getting baptized doesn't make you saved. It represents to other people that you have committed to a change of course in your life. That's all it is. It has 0 redemptive qualities of its own. The only thing necessary for redemption from sin is to ask for forgiveness from sin. It is really that simple. I mean, there is a change of direction that is required too. Like, you have to not keep doing the thing. But other than that, there's really not any other requirements. You don't have to burn a certain incense or kill any animals or people in order for it to happen. None of that is a necessity. Never has been, never will be. And that is a great misunderstanding that people have. Very great also is the virtue of it in the religious worship of God, in expiations and purifications. Yea, the necessity of it is no less than that of fire. It is important to note, once again, right, in the religious worship of God is ceremonies. Ceremonies can have power, but they have exactly the power that you imbue into them. They hold no intrinsic power themselves. And so ritually cleaning yourself is a great idea because being clean is healthy, but other than that, there's really no point. Infinite are the benefits. I mean, it puts you in the right frame of mind, right? And so, okay, but other than that, All right. Infinite are the benefits, and diverse are the uses thereof, as being that by virtue of which all things subsist, are generated, nourished, and increased. Thence it was that Thales of Miletus and Hesiod conclude that water was the beginning of all things, and said it was the first of all the elements, and the most potent, and that because it hath mastery over all the rest. And once again, I will point out that, right, before the beginning there was God, and God was infinite and without bounds. Right? He was the void. And then God decided to create, and so he limited himself from the infinite into the finite, the shift from God into the Spirit. The Spirit is quite literally every single element in existence all at once. The motion of those elements, when God spoke and said, I am the light, right? That motion is the Logos. Now, that is the Spirit in motion. The Spirit, therefore, would be the original element. Now, that is every element in existence, all at the exact same time, but none of them are combined. So you can make the argument for air, right? You can't make the argument for water. Hydrogen and oxygen have not bound yet. So, therefore, air is existent, but until fire changes that into the different compounds, there is nothing. And so, for me, fire is the primary. It always will be, and there is no getting around that. If there was anything else, it would be air, not water, for the reason I just listed. For, as Pliny saith, waters swallow up the earth, extinguish flames, ascend on high, and by the stretching forth of the clouds, challenge the heaven for their own. The same falling down become the cause of all things that grow in the earth. Very many are the wonders that are done by waters, according to the writings of Pliny, Solinus, and other historians, of the wonderful virtue whereof Ovid also makes mention in these verses. Horned Haman's waters at high noon are cold, hot at sunrise and setting sun. Wood put in bubbling Athamas is fired, the moon is farthest from the sun retired. Ciconian steams congeal his guts to stone, that thereof drinks, and what therein is thrown. Carathis and Sybaris, from the mountains rolled, color the hair like amber, pure gold. Some fountains of a more prodigious kind not only change the body, but the mind. Who hath not heard of obscene Salmacis, or the Ethiopian lake? For who of this but only taste their whips to longer keep, or forward fall into deadly sleep? Who at Clitoris' fountain thirst remove, loathe wine and abstinent, mere water love. With dreams opposed to these incestuous flows, they reel as drunk who drink too much of those. A lake in far Arcadia stands of old, called Phineus, suspected as twofold. Fear and forbear to drink thereof by night unwholesome, wholesome by daylight. This is an interesting turn of phrase for my juvenile mind, right? I don't know the context behind that, but that's definitely a funny one for me, right? This is saying things you can do with water, but it's not saying, right, it is attributing something that is not necessarily there. Now, I don't know obscene Samausius, but an Ethiopian lake, but only a taste their wits no longer keep, sounds like poison water to me. Or forward fall into a deadly sleep. I think you can find those in North America around Yellowstone. We just watched a bison get dissolved in one just last week. And so that is definitely a thing, right? Loathe wine and abstinent mere water love. With streams opposed to licentious flows, they reel as drunk, who drink too much of those. And so this is attributing the characteristics of alcohol to a stream, and there is none of that anywhere, right? There is not a single place on the entirety of the planet where you can go and there is a naturally bubbling spring of wine. It is just not a thing, right? You're not going to find no distilled alcohols just naturally occurring out in the open. You might find fermentation happening. That is absolutely a thing, but not a spring of wine, right? Josephus also makes revelation of the wonderful nature of a certain river between Arcia and Raphania, cities of Syria, which runs with a full channel all the Sabbath day, and then on sudden ceaseth, as if the springs were stopped, and all 6 days you may pass over it dry shod, but again on the seventh day no man knowing the reason of it, the waters return again in abundance, as before. Wherefore the inhabitants called it the Sabbath day river, because of the seventh day, which was holy to the Jews. Now, I cannot say with any authority that this is not true, but I can say with a good bit of intelligence that this is almost certainly not true. Right? There are intermittent springs, that is a thing, but they are not on a time clock like this. Right? Even Old Faithful blows on a regular schedule, right? But not in this manner. Right? This is like it blows every day or every 2 days. Whenever it builds the pressure up, it blows, and it's not a spring; it's a geyser. Right? It is a whole different action. There are springs that are intermittent, but has to do with the water table and rainfall in the area and things like that. It has got nothing to do with a Sabbath day. This is one of those many not truths that we can find in history, right? So many things that are believed that are not necessarily correct. This is definitely one of those, right? I say that with a little bit of certainty, right? But once again, you can never be fully certain about many things. You can be fully certain that there is not a spring of wine. That is a certainty. There may somehow, some way be a spring that only works 1 day out of 7, but I highly, highly, highly doubt it. The gospel also testifies of a sheep pool, into which whosoever stepped first after the water was troubled by the angel was made whole of whatever disease he had. This is one of those myths that is simply not true again, right? You can imbue power into anything, and if you have faith enough, you can cure a whole multitude of things, right? I've done a little bit of that work myself. Now, I use different procedures than just stepping into water, but if you have enough faith that being the first one to step into this pool will heal you, and you have the right condition, then it will. But for the most part, this is just stupid. Right? It's a superstition. If I get there before everybody else, when does it start counting? Does it start counting at midnight? Do you have a clock to count to 12:01? Do you keep it that precise? Are you the first one in there in the middle of the night? Is it at daybreak? Do you have to be the first one at daybreak? Is it at dusk? When does the clock start? When is the first? Because, I mean, they observed the Sabbath starting at sundown, so maybe that's the beginning of the new day. Maybe that's when it counts, right? It's kind of arbitrary, don't you think? It seems like a great thing, right? It seems like a wonderful mystery that you can find out there. And that's what it was to them. It was like, oh, well, God did this too, yeah? And it's not true, right? It's just simply not a thing. The same virtue and efficiency, we read, was in a spring of the Ionian nymphs, which was in the territories belonging to the town of Elise, at a village called Heraclea, near the city river of Cytherion, which whosoever stepped into, being diseased, came forth whole and cured of all his diseases. If this was true, everybody would be there, right? If it was a thing, right? This one's not even limited to the first. If you go there, you're going to be healed of anything. There is a 0% chance that if this was true, we would have doctors, right? You would just make the trek for almost everything, right? There are some things you're not going to be able to make the trek for, but if you got cancer, I'm buying the first plane ticket. I'm going to go jump in the river, right? It doesn't happen. It's not real. Pausanias also reports that in Lycius, as a mountain of Arcadia, there was a spring called Agrippa, to which, as often as the dryness of the region threatened the destruction of fruits, Jupiter's priest of Lycius went, and after an offering of sacrifices, devoutly praying to the waters of the spring, holding a bough of an oak in his hand, putting it down in the bottom of the hallowed spring, then the waters being troubled, a vapor ascending from thence into the air was blown into the clouds, with which, being joined together, the whole heaven was overspread, which, being a little after dissolved into rain, watered all the country most wholesomely. Now, this may have a kernel of truth in it. Being able to affect the weather is definitely a thing. I mean, I have done it, is why I've got the injuries that I've got. And so, it is definitely a thing you could do if you were investing the energy in the correct way. And, I mean, having faith and performing the ritual will absolutely give you the right direction. Now, whether that ritual is necessary, that's up for debate. But It is entirely possible through the electromagnetic manipulation of what I talk about here all of the time to do such things. It is incredibly ill-advised, I will say, due to the results that I bear from it. You can go back to my story, but I got in a wreck from playing with the weather. It's a rather interesting story, but whatever. The repercussions from affecting that great of a thing is big, right? It has to be perfect intentionality when you're doing it, all of these things. And if the land is in a drought and you are going to make it rain, then it's aligned correctly, right? The law of response is going to work in the correct manner because you're correctly aligned with the laws of creation. And so this can work. Right? This is a ceremony. Ceremonies have power if you imbue them with the power. It doesn't have it on its own. Right? It doesn't matter if it's an oak in his hand. If you believe that this stick is going to do it, then the stick's going to do it. For a lot of things. But on top of that, then the waters being troubled, a vapor ascending from thence into the air was blown into the clouds. It's a lot like cloud seeding. Right? Now, suppose there was a geyser like we were just talking about, and that you could force it to set off by putting oak in it or something. Now, I don't know how that would work. You can make tannin out of oak, right? You soak it in barrels. You can put leather in it that's been prepared hides, and you put it in the tannin, and then the tannin cures the hides, right? Maybe there's some type of a process with the oak in the water with some heat, maybe causing a vapor to rise. I don't know. But if there is a vapor rising from a pool into the air and joining with the clouds, that's cloud seeding. And so that's entirely possible as well. Moreover, Rufus, a physician of Ephesus, besides many other authors, wrote strange things concerning the wonders of water, which, for aught I know, are found in no other author. It remains that I speak of the air. This is a vital spirit, passing through all beings, giving life and subsistence to all things, binding and moving and filling all things. Hence it is that the Hebrew doctors reckoned it not amongst the elements, but counted as a medium, or glue, joining things together, and as the resounding spirit of the world's instrument. It's actually the spirit that binds everything together. It immediately receives into itself the influences of all celestial bodies, and then communicates them to the other elements, as also to all mixed bodies. Also, it receives into itself, as if it were a divine looking glass, the species of all things, as well natural as artificial, as also of all manner of speeches, and retains them, and carrying them with it, and entering into the bodies of men and other animals through their pores, makes an impression upon them as well when they sleep as when they are awake, and affords matters for diverse strange dreams and divinations. None of that is incorrect, right? The air is going to be influenced by the moon. That's a celestial body in the same way that water is, just not as measurable. And right, so that works. It receives itself as if it were a divine looking glass, the species of all things. That's kind of true as well. And all manner of speeches. You can't speak without air. Carrying it with them, entering into the bodies of men and other animals through their pores. That is absolutely a thing. Aspiration happens. Makes an impression upon them as well when they sleep. Now, this is attributing vapors to nightmares, and that's not necessarily correct, but bad air will make you have bad dreams. So, okay. None of that is necessarily magical, though. Hence, they say it is that a man passing by a place where a man was slain, or the carcass newly hid, is moved with fear and dread, because the air in that place, being full of the dreadful species of manslaughter, doth, being breathed in, move and trouble the spirit of the man with the like species, whence it is that he comes to be afraid, and everything that makes a sudden impression astonisheth nature. That's interesting. That is entirely possible, right? The putrefaction is a thing. You can smell people rotting. This says that it is newly hid, so it probably wouldn't be rotting, but the smell of blood is a thing. When you kill someone, there is definitely some other smells attached, and so maybe you can smell it. That is a thing. Now, the spirit of manslaughter being in the air, to me is not a thing, right? You're not going to catch manslaughter. It's not a disease. I guess it is a little bit of a disease, but for the most part, it's not contagious unless you're just hanging around the wrong people and you're easily impressionable. So I don't believe that the vapors of a dead body is going to make you commit homicide. Whence it is that many philosophers were of opinion that air is the cause of dreams and of many other impressions in the mind. They are wrong. Through the prolonging of images or similitudes or species, which are fallen from things and speeches, multiplying in the very air, until they come to the senses, and then to the fantasy. The soul of him that receives them, which, being freed from cares, is no way hindered, expecting to meet such kind of species, is informed by them. For the species of things, although of their own proper nature, they are carried to the senses of men, and other animals in general, may, notwithstanding, get some impression from the heaven, whilst they be in the air. By reason of which, together with the aptness of dispositions of him that receives them, they may be carried to the sense of one rather than another. And again, I don't believe that air causes dreams, right? You can have bad dreams if there's bad air. That is definitely a thing. But for the most part, it's not. I mean, your dreams are caused by the things that happen to you during the day or have happened to you in the past or that you are concerned may happen to you in the future. That is the cause of your dreams, right? It is you processing information. And so it's not the air that you're breathing. And again, it is not a contagion. And hence, it is possible, naturally, and far from all manner of superstition, no other spirit coming between, that a man should be able, in a very little time, to signify his mind unto another man, abiding at a very long and unknown distance from him, although he cannot precisely give an estimate of the time when it is. Yet of necessity, it must be within 24 hours, and I myself know how to do it and have often done it. The same also in time past did the abbot Trotinius both know and do. Now, this is one of those things that I don't disbelieve, right? I don't have any experience with it for the most part, right? Now, me and my wife have a fairly close relationship, and sometimes we can communicate telepathically, even from distances, but nothing like repeatable, trackable, traceable evidence, right? Just coincidental things that happen. But I do believe that it is possible, right? There are definitely things that are beyond the normal kin, right? If you look into twins at all, this is a really good example of this. If you look at twins at all, they have twin syndrome, which is if they're separated, right? Completely different sides of the country, and one of them gets in an accident, the other one knows something. A lot of the time, not all of the time, but a lot of the time, the significance of it even, right? Sometimes it's like, why does my leg hurt? Let me call my brother. And you find out your brother just broke his leg. Those type of things happen a lot with twins, and they share a lot of connections that other people don't. But if it is possible through one, it's possible through many. At least that's what I believe. I don't believe that any of us hold any exclusives, right? And so for the most part, if they can do it, then there might be another way to do it as well. And if they can do it without willing, it is possible to do it willfully. And so to me, this is not beyond the realm of significance. Beyond that, there's astral travel, which there is significant reason to believe. Whether or not all of the accounts are accurate, Casey, are not necessarily true, right? But there have been instances that have been traceable and trackable. People have communicated over a distance in experimental form, and it worked, right? I can't call any of the specific instances, but it definitely has been done. And so to me, this is definitely well within the realm of possibility. But attributing it to air, to me, is going to be fallacious. It's the wrong way to look at it. It's actually the spirit, right? The spirit is the binding element. It is the magnetism that holds all things together. The fire and the lightning that we see are the visible forms of that change happening, but the change is happening in smaller ways, and all of the things are interconnected. The moon moves the water because of the magnetism of the moon. All things are influenced by magnetism, and all things are held together by magnetism. Every single atom in existence has a nucleus, and it is surrounded by a flow of electrons moving by electromagnetism. It is possible to move electromagnetic energies. I fully and firmly believe that, even though it is still within the realm of speculation. And so if it is possible to do so, then it is absolutely possible to project intention across distance, which is what this would be. I mean, talking to someone across a distance without a phone line. And these days we have less reason to attempt it because we have the ability to communicate over a distance. But once upon a time, this was something that was desperately sought after, and it worked in some occasions. And so definitely within the realm of possibility, even if we cannot empirically prove it as of yet. Back to the text. Also, when certain appearances, not only spiritual but also natural, do flow forth from things, that is to say, by a certain kind of flowings forth of bodies from bodies, and do gather strength in the air, they offer and show themselves to us as well through light as motion, as well to the sight as to other senses, and sometimes work wonderful things upon us, as Plotinus proves and teaches. And we see how by the south wind the air is condensed into thin clouds, in which, as in a looking glass, are reflected representations at a great distance of castles, mountains, horses, and men, and other things, and when the clouds are gone, presently vanish. This is optical illusion, and it works. It happens all of the time. Here in the south, it gets rather warm. And you can walk out on the road any summer day that it's not raining. And if the sun's beating down, you can walk out early. And you can see the heat rising up off of the roadway, right? That's an optical illusion. It's definitely a thing. Oases, right? The whole trope of wandering through the desert and seeing an oasis that you are struggling to get to that you never do. Optical illusion. There have even been, in the clouds, visible cities. It is an optical illusion, a refraction of the light from way over there. But it's real. It happens. It is witnessed. It is definitely in the realm of empirical, right? This is definitely a thing that does occur. Now, whether or not his attributions are correct, right? What causes the heat wave? That would be the spirit, right? That is fire. That's the spirit. It affects the air, but without the heat, there is no mirage. So, once again, to me, misattribution of the real thing. In Aristotle, in his Meteors, shows that a rainbow is conceived in a cloud of the air, as in a looking glass. That is true. And Albertus saith that but it's not by air. It is refracted light from water, suspended in the air. And Albertus saith that the effigies of bodies may, by the strength of nature in a moist air, be easily represented, in the same manner as the representations of things are in things. And Aristotle tells of a man, to whom it happened by reason of the weakness of his sight, that the air was near to him, became as it were a looking glass to him, and the optic beam did reflect back upon himself, and could not penetrate the air, so that, whithersoever he went, he thought he saw his own image with his face towards him, go before him. That is not outside of the realm of possibility, but it is, again, highly unlikely that something like this happened. Now, weakness of his sight, that can be a thing, right? Glaucoma exists. What else we got? Macular degeneration. There are definitely things that can cause your vision to diminish. And then if you have the ability to visualize things, you could visualize your reflection in the dimness of the light, which is now your normal. That doesn't mean that it was actually true. Optical illusions are a thing, but the condensation of air in a relatively small area so that you can see yourself reflected, to me, is going to be well outside of the realm of possibility. But I can't prove it. In like manner, by the artificialness of some certain looking glasses may be produced at a distance in the air, beside the looking glasses, what images we please. We do that these days, right? Which, when ignorant means see, they think they see the appearances of spirits or souls, when indeed they are nothing but the semblances kin to themselves, and without life. And it is well known, if in a dark place where there is no light, but by the coming in of a beam of the sun, Somewhere, through a little hole, a white paper or plain looking glass be set up against the light, that there may be seen upon them whatsoever things are done without, being shined upon by the sun. Now this, if in a dark place where there is no light, but by the coming in of a beam of the sun, somewhere through a little hole. Now, you can definitely do this experiment, right? We do this experiment all the time. It's a pinhole lens. If you make a little box out of paper and you poke a hole in it and you put a hole on the other side, and you can look at it at an eclipse, not directly, but at the shadow of the eclipse hidden through the hole, the little pinhole, and you can see the moon move across the sun. Like that's a real thing that you can do. That's what he's talking about here. Now, the other part is mirrors, creating illusions. That is definitely a thing. That is part of the reason for the hysteria in the 1800s behind theosophy. So, there is another sleight or trick, yet more wonderful. If anyone shall take images, artificially painted or written letters, and in a clear night set them against the beams of the full moon, whose resemblances be multiplied in the air, and caught upward, are reflected back together with the beams of the moon, any other man that is privy to the thing at a long distance sees, reads, and knows them in the very compass and circle of the moon, which art of declaring secrets is indeed very profitable for towns and cities that are besieged, being a thing which Pythagoras long since did often do, and which is not unknown to some in these days. I will not except myself. So he is saying that he has done this, right? This is an I have performed this act, and I haven't, so I don't know. But take an image or a written letter, and on a clear night, set them against the beams of the full moon. And it's caught upward and reflected back with the beams of the moon. And another man who knows that this can happen can read that on the moon. I can't say that it's not real, right? Like in the exact same way that we can't say that clairvoyance is not real, well, the same way that we can't say that clairaudience is not a real thing. This can be true, but it's probably not, right? This can be the clairvoyance or the clairaudience, right? This can be you projecting through force of will something to another person's psyche, right? And the method by which you use, the ceremony that you imbue, is going out here with this piece of paper and reflecting the light back to the moon, setting the intention and therefore carrying out the process. That is more likely than that it's actually reflected to the moon and someone can read it across that distance. That's extremely unlikely. And all these, and many more, and greater than these, are grounded in the very nature of the air, and have their reasons and causes declared in mathematics and optics. That I can agree with. And as these resemblances are reflected back to the sight, so also sometimes to the hearing, as is manifest in the echo. But there are more secret arts than these, and such whereby anyone may at a very remote distance hear and understand what another speaks or whispers softly. And I do not doubt that that is a possibility. I don't have the ability, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. There are also from the airy elements winds, for they are nothing else but air moved and stirred up by heat and magnetism, the spirit. Of these, there are four that are principal, blowing from the four corners of the heaven, vis-a-vis Notus from the south, Boreas from the north, Zephyrus from the west, and Aruus from the east, which Pontius, comprehending in these verses, saith, Cold Boreas from the top of Olympus blows, and from the bottom cloudy Notus flows. From setting Phobos fruitful Zephyrus flies, from barren Areus from the sun's uprise. Notus is the southern wind, cloudy, moist, warm, and sickly, which Hieronymus calls the butler of the rains. Ovid describes it thus. Out flies south wind with dropping wings, who shrouds his fearful aspects in pitchy clouds. His white hair streams, his beard big, swollen with showers, mist-spined his brow, rain from his bosom pours. I guess something is lost in translation there. But Boreas is contrary to Notus and is the northern wind, fierce and roaring, and discussing clouds makes the air serene, and binds the water with frost. Him doth Ovid thus bring in speaking for himself. Force me befits, with this thick clouds I drive, toss the blue billows, knotty oaks uprive, congeal soft snow, and beat the earth with hail, when I my brethren in the air assail. For that's our field, we meet with such a shock, the thundering skies with our encounters rock. A cloud-struck lightning flashes from on high, when through the crannies of the earth I fly. In force of our hollow caves I make the ghost to tremble and the ground to quake. And Zephyrus, which is the western wind, is most soft, blowing from the west with a pleasant gale. It is cold and moist, removing the effects of winter, bringing forth branches and flowers. To this, Arius is contrary, which is the eastern wind, and is called Apoleotes. It is waterish, cloudy, and ravenous. Of these two, Ovid sings thus. To Persis and Sabia, Eris flies, whose gums perfume the morning, the blushing morn's uprise. Next to the evening and the coast that glows, with all setting Phoebus, flowery Zephyrus blows. In Scythia horrid Boreas holds his reign beneath Boetes and the frozen Wain. And land to this opposed doth Auster steep, with fruitful showers and clouds, which ever weep. All right, let's see what the next chapter is. That is a salamander. Look at that. Chapter 7. Of the kinds of compounds, what relation they stand in to the elements, and what relation there is betwixt the elements themselves and the soul, senses, and dispositions of men. Next, after the four simple elements follows the four kinds of perfect bodies compounded of them, and they are stones, metal, plants, and animals. And although unto the generation of each of these all the elements meet together in the composition, yet every one of them follows and resembles one of the elements which is most predominant. For all stones are earthy, and they are naturally heavy in descent, and so hardened with dryness they cannot be melted. But metals are waterish and may be melted, which naturalists confess and chemists find to be true, vis-a-vis that they are generated of a viscous water, or waterish agent vivae. Plants have such an affinity with the air that unless they be abroad in the open air, they do neither bud nor increase. All right, so all stones are earthy. Okay, we can definitely deal with that one. They are naturally heavy and descend. Okay, so hardened with dryness that they cannot be melted is not quite true, right? We can smelt ore from stones. Right now you can make the argument that that's a metal, not a stone. Okay, igneous rock exists, right? What is igneous rock? Rock that has been melted and now formed into the form that it is in. That was melted stone, so they can be melted. It just takes an exceptionally high temperature, which is hard to achieve, but you can do it. Metals are waterish and may be well melted, yes. They are generated of a viscous water. I don't know about that one. Or a waterish agent vivae. Plants have an affinity with the air. That is definitely a true thing. But that unless they be abroad in the open air, they neither do bud nor increase. Greenhouses are a thing. And so, now you can't put them into a box with a vacuum and expect them to grow, right? That's not going to happen. But they can definitely be cut off from the flow of the natural air and they still grow and bud. So all animals have in their natures a most fiery force, and also spring from a celestial source. Yeah, the Holy Spirit. And fire is so natural to them that being extinguished, they presently die. True. And again, every one of those kinds is distinguished within itself by reasons of degrees of the elements. I have a theory that I call the theory of spiritual evolution, by which we see a progression of understanding. That's the best way I can think of to put it, I guess. But it begins on the elemental plane, every single element existing. And then they are compounded into more things, and they become plants. And then they are assimilated into animals. And then there are different divisions of animals, right? The elemental plane is the first one. Plants are the second one. The lesser animals, which are the animals that cannot be trained, they act on instinct alone. That's the third one. The fourth realm is the realm of the intelligent animals. Dogs and horses, pigs, things that you can train to do things. They can anticipate time, but they don't really have an understanding of it. Then you have the fifth plane, which is us. We have 5D reality. I know everybody likes to think 3D, but that's stupid, right? We have length, width, and height, which is the 3D reality, but we also have time, which is another one. And then we have thought, which is a whole different reality. And so we have 5 dimensions to our reality, and we navigate through it. But dogs don't have thought. Right? They have instinct. They have the capacity to learn to anticipate, but they don't contemplate their existence. Right? They know when they're going to get fed. They have the ability to develop a routine, whereas an instinctual animal doesn't. But the differentiation really is the ability to think. We can think in a way that other animals can't. That sets us apart. That is the 5th dimension. Now, I believe that there are more dimensions. I believe that there's a dimension above us where there are elementals who dwell, who have the ability to see backwards and forward in time, but not really understand that. And then there are the 7th plane, which is the angels and the demons and the genies and things, who can see backwards, forwards in time and absolutely understand it. That is all speculative, right? And I don't know that it could ever be a proven thing, but that is how it has been revealed to me. Now, there's also the 8th, right? The 8th and the 0 are the same. It's source. You come from somewhere, you go to somewheres. That is 0, infinity, and 8, infinity. All right. For amongst the stones, they especially are called earthy, that are dark and more heavy, and those waterish which are transparent and compacted of water, as crystal, beryl, and pearls. And in the shells of fishes, and they are called airy, which swim upon the water and are spongious, as the stones of a sponge, the pumice stone and the stone suphus. Now, the stones of a sponge, I'm not sure that that is a correct appellation, right? A sponge is a living creature. We kill it to use to scrub ourselves, like not the artificial ones that we make these days, but the ones he's talking about then. Like they dry really hard and they use them to scrub themselves for bathing. But it wasn't a stone, right? It was a calcium-based life form that created that, much in the same way that the coral reef happens. And so I don't know that the designation of stone for a sponge would be correct. Now, pumice stone, just generally speaking, lighter than water. Some of them are a little bit heavier, but for the most part, they will float on water, so that makes sense. And I'm not sure about the stone sophus. I will see if we can get to note 7 real quick. Okay, this one's not that bad. Sophus, tophus, a general name for porous stones produced as sediments or incrustations, particularly a stony substance deposited by calcareous springs. Okay, so this is like a limestone spring creating a porous stone that is lighter than water. That's not outside of the realm of possibility at all. Back to the text. And they are called fiery, out of which fire is extracted, or which are resolved into fire, or which are produced of fire, as thunderbolts, firestones, and stone asbestos. Okay, so thunderbolt. Let's look at these again, right? Just right here, 8, 9, and 10. All right, so thunderbolts is the name applied to several mineral substances supposed to have been formed or left by lightning strikes, including prehistoric stone implements, nodules of iron pyrites found in chalk, and meteorites. But Agrippa probably refers to belemnite, a fossilized bone of a cephalopod similar to the cuttlefish. It is found in fossil beds and is the smooth, blue stone cylinder several inches long that tapers to a sharp point. Also called a thunderstone and an elf bolt. In fact, lightning can actually form a conical stone when it strikes and fuses fine sand into glass called ceraunia. And all of that is definitely a possibility. Firestones. Stones for striking sparks to make fire. This name was applied to iron pyrites and flint. And 10 is asbestos, which we are familiar with. Just don't breathe it. It is definitely fireproof, right? All right. Also, amongst metals, lead and silver are earthy, quicksilver is waterish, copper and tin are airy, and gold and iron are fiery. I'm going to put in an interjection here that's not necessarily relevant, but some of the people who follow this will definitely find some interest in it. Did you know that we have 2 brand new types of stone being developed right now? It is happening at a rapid pace. One comes from the waste products from iron smelting, the various slag is dumped into the ocean, and it has formed brand new stones in a relatively short period of time, something like 25 years. That is complete incrustation, forming new stone types in 25 years. That's interesting for those of you who really like that Tartaria conspiracy. Right? We didn't build it, we found it. You're an idiot. Secondarily, there is another type of stone that is being created. It is being formed in the ocean. It is light, right? And by light, I don't mean the light we see, but it is light so that it floats on top of the water. It is formed from plastic. We have right now in the middle of the ocean plastic that is melting, dissolving into blobs, and absorbing the various minerals contained in the water and becoming stone. They have found pull tabs like you get from the Coke cans, or used to get from the Coke cans back when I was a kid. They found those in the middle of these things. They found various plastic waste that has formed a stone. So we have created stones here. It may be a defining point when people in the future are looking back to say, oh, well, this is when the use of plastics was so prolific. Right? It is just an interesting aside brought about by the stones and being fiery and light and all of those things. Like, we're doing things to the earth. May not be a good thing, but it is taking care of the plastic problem, right? There are organics growing on these stones. There are bacteria that are dissolving the plastics. These things are amazing to me, right? Life has adapted, and it is absorbing our waste. Interesting. All right, back to the text. In plants also, the roots resemble the earth by reason of their thickness, and the leaves, water, because of their juice. Flowers, the air, because of their subtility. And the seeds, the fire, by reason of their multiplying spirit. Besides, they are called some hot, some cold, some moist, some dry, borrowing their names from the qualities of the elements. Amongst animals also, some are in comparison of others earthy, and dwell in the bowels of the earth, as worms and moles, and many other small creeping vermin. Others are watery, as fishes. Others airy, which cannot live out of the air. Others also are fiery, living in the fire, as salamanders and crickets. Such are as of fiery heat, as pigeons, ostriches, lions, and such as the wise man calls beasts breathing fire. All right. Hold up. Others are airy, which cannot live out of the air. Okay. That would be pretty much all surface-dwelling animals. Right? You can't just take air away from anything that lives above the water. And even then, you can make the argument in the water that they're getting air from the fluid. But living in the fire as salamanders and crickets, that's an interesting thing, right? Let's look at that. Because, I mean, unless it's a different breed, it's not talking about the actual salamanders, right? Where is it? 11. Salamanders. Pliny describes the salamanders as an animal like a lizard in shape and with a body starred all over. Never comes out except during heavy showers and disappears the moment it becomes fine. This animal is so intensely cold as to extinguish fire by its contact, in the same way as ice does. So it lives in fire, but it kills fire. That's what you're saying. It spits forth a milky matter from its mouth, and whatever part of the human body is touched with this, all the hair falls off, and part assumes the appearance of leprosy. So you have found a poisonous reptile, right? The Gila monster, for instance, will do something remarkably similar to this. The poison of it will disintegrate the skin and take off large sections of hair and flesh. An interesting side note, people are distilling that and injecting it into themselves because that's a wise idea, right? If you don't know what I'm talking about, Ozempic, the magical weight loss drug, it is created from the venom of a Gila monster. And what it does is it goes in there and it dissolves the fat, but it also dissolves proteins. And they're not telling people this, but people are losing their eyesight behind this particular drug. They are losing their kidney function, their liver function behind this particular drug, but they're losing weight without having to get up off the couch and quitting eating. So I guess it's a win, right? Elsewhere, he expands on his poisonous powers. But of all venomous animals, it is the salamander that is by far the most dangerous. For while other reptiles attack individuals only and never kill many persons at a time, the salamander is able to destroy whole nations at once, unless they take the proper precautions against it. I'm going to go ahead and say no to this. For if the reptile happens to crawl up a tree and infects all of the fruit with its poison and kills those who eat thereof by the chilling properties of its venom, which in its effects is in no way different from aconite. Well, we're doing that to ourselves, as I just explained. Nay, even more than this, if it only touches with its foot the wood upon which bread is baked, or if it happens to fall into a well, the same fatal effects will be sure to ensue. Now, again, this is highly in the realm of unlikely, but touching the board can be transmitting diseases, and therefore that can make sense, right? A little bit. If it happens to fall in a well and it has poisonous venom, then that absolutely can have an effect, right? Especially if it's somehow a high enough concentration to be a problem. So that's not outside of the realm of possibility. The saliva, too, of this reptile, when it comes into contact with any part of the body, the sole of the foot even, will cause the hair to fall off from the whole of the body. As to what the magicians say, that it is proof against fire, being, as they tell us, the only animal that has the property of extinguishing fire. If it had been true, it would have been made trial of at Rome long before this. As a natural extension of the fable of its deadly fire quenching cold, the salamander was said to live and breed in the heart of the hottest flames. In the folklore of the Middle Ages, it was described as man-like in appearance. Paracelsus was probably the first to ascribe the name of the class of elemental fire spirits in his Liber de Nymphes Sylphis Pygmaeus et Salamandrius et de Coeturus Spiritubus, book of nymphs, sylphs, pygmies, and salamanders and kindred beings. That is an interesting book. Crickets, specifically Acadia domestica, the house cricket. That's fire, you say. In medieval times, the cricket was confused with the salamander, probably due to its fondness for hearth and the heat of stoves and ovens. The cricket hight salamandria, for this beast quencheth fire and lieth in braining fire. John de Trevisia. Now, this is right. If you have a heat source, then you are going to attract bugs to it. They don't live in the fire. I can guarantee you that crickets do not live through fire. Pigeons. It was an old medical practice to apply living pigeons to the soles of the feet of those gravely ill with fever. I bet that helped. Samuel Pepys mentions this treatment given to Catherine of Braganza, wife of King Charles II, when she had spotted fever. It seems she was so ill as to be shaved and pigeons put to her feet, and to have extreme unction given her by the priest, who was so long about it that the doctors were angry. Ostriches. Ostriches were thought able to live without water and to digest iron. That is not true. And breathing fire. Dragons. I love it. This is great. Alright, where were we at? Ostriches, lions, and such as the wise man calls beasts breathing fire. Besides, in animals the bones resemble the earth, flesh the air. Flesh the air, you say. The vital spirit the fire, and the humors the water. The humors would, I guess, be blood. I don't know that air is a good representation of flesh, however. That would be a different form of earth, or a blending together of earth and water. I don't know that you can do that with air for flesh. It just doesn't work. The fire is the spirit, of course, but... Alright, and these humors also partake of the elements. For yellow, color is instead of fire, blood instead of air, phlegm instead of water, and black color, or melancholy, instead of earth. What is this? I'm going to pop this out because it was not in the footnotes. Anger or irritability, one of the four humors of ancient medieval physiology, thought to cause anger and bad temper. Okay, and these humors also partake of the elements. Anger for fire, blood for air, phlegm for water, and black anger or melancholy instead of earth. Let's see what the actual footnote was. I see it just says of earth. Alright, so And lastly, in the soul itself, according to Austin, the understanding resembles fire, reason, the air, imagination, the water, and the senses, the earth. What? Understanding, reason, and imagination are inextricably linked. They are not separate forces. They are all part of the cognitive process. Right? If you don't have reason, then you don't understand things. If you don't have imagination, then you can't envision things. And by that, I don't mean necessarily seeing, but have a plan for, right? If you cannot imagine a possibility, then you cannot create the possibility. And while it can be represented by water if you wanted to separate these three things into the different elements is just simply wanting it to be that way. They would all be fire, right? Life, light, thought, motion, heat, all of that is the logos. That is fire. And so understanding would be fire, reason would be fire, imagination would be fire, and senses would probably be the earth. Now, and that is with the caveat, not the understanding of the senses, right? Just the physical, this thing hit me, right? But even that is transmitted by the logos. When, like, if I touch my finger and I can feel it, or I poke it with something and I can feel it, it's not really my mind feeling it. My hand feels it. The logos sends a signal to my mind, and then I feel it. And so that even could be linked to fire. And these senses also are divided amongst themselves by reason of the elements. For the sight is fiery, neither can it perceive without fire and light. Yeah, the hearing is airy, for a sound is made by the striking of the air. Okay, that's close enough. I mean, again, all transfer is logos, right? If there is motion, there is logos. Sound is motion created by logos, so it's linked to fire on a fundamental level, but you can attribute that one to air. It is carried by air. And sound is made by the striking of the air. The smell and taste resemble the water, without the moisture of which there is neither smell nor taste. And again, that is attributing moisture to a quality that is not necessarily there, right? There is humidity in the air. That is a thing, right? Almost everywhere. There are places where there is a remarkably little amount of humidity, but even there, it's very rarely a 0%. And so, yeah, without moisture, okay, but it's not the moisture that's doing it. Now, this is the vapors released from the particular thing, and that's the water, but even that's not really a good fit. That would be better for air. Again, taste, you can attribute that one mostly to water, although it is inextricably linked to your nostrils, right? If you didn't know, your nose plays a big part in what you taste. And lastly, the feeling is wholly earthly and takes gross bodies for its objects. And again, I don't necessarily disagree with that for the body. The actions also and the operations of man are governed by the elements. The earth signifies a slow and firm motion. The water signifies fearfulness and sluggishness and remissness in working. Air signifies cheerfulness and amiable disposition. But fear is quick and angry disposition. The elements, therefore, are first of all things, and of all things are of, and according to them, and they are in all things, and they diffuse their virtues through all things. And that's going to bring us to the end of this particular section. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a not too difficult set of topics, right? I understand that I hold some unconventional beliefs, and I have a tendency to step on toes when I relay those. It is not intentional, but I do not apologize for it. Discerning what is true from what is not is the whole purpose of this, right? There are several things in here that can absolutely be attributed to logical conclusions. And there are some things in here that are definitely not true, and there are some things in here that might be true, but we can't prove them. I'm just trying to go through and sort. I'm just trying to go through according to the knowledge that I have, which is not everything, right? I have a good, extensive knowledge on most things, but I do not have a full knowledge of pretty much anything, right? I'm one of those jacks of all trades. I know a little bit about everything. And so I'm just trying to discern logically, using my mind and spirit, to discern whether or not these things are true, could be true, or definitely false, and to extrapolate therein. I'm expecting to find more things, right? The elements are pretty basic. I think this wraps up the elements, but I had like this this table of contents does not differentiate at all these different chapters inside the books. So I have no idea how long the chapters are. I'm not going through ahead of time, right? We're just trying to hit an hour on the timer. And so I read enough chapters to where we get close to an hour and I wrap it up. So I don't know what the next chapter is even. I guess we could scroll down and look. Let's see what the next one's going to be. How the elements are in heavens and stars and devils and angels, and lastly in God himself, is more of a philosophical debate than the actual talking about the elements. So I guess it is kind of a new topic. With that being said, I'm just here to try to figure out where the actual knowledge is in here and where is some superstitions, and to differentiate. And if that's what you like, if you like what I'm doing over here, let me know down below. Give me a like, a share, a follow, throw me a comment if you agree or disagree with anything that was said. Put it in the box down below, and if it remains respectful, it gets to remain up. If there is another work you would like to see me read or discuss in the manner that we are doing here, put that in the box as well. And if you really like what I'm doing, hit me with that super thanks. Consider joining for a membership or picking up a copy of my book where I teach you how to do magic responsibly. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you were here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete, just the way that you are. And this has been Fit State. Peace.